if you start behaving in that way, you'll start to become that way. It's like the acting as if, dressing for the role 2 levels above where you are, and to think about who you want to be before you become that. And it makes sense. When a baby elephant is being trained and they put like a small chain on the ankle of the elephant, so it can just walk in a circle and it can't escape. But then as the baby elephant gets bigger and bigger, it could quite easily break the chain and go off, but it doesn't ever do it because it's being conditioned to believe that it's trapped by this chain, this belief that it has now that it can't escape, even though it could quite easily do that. And I think that's often us.
Hey, Harry. Jet-setting lifestyle. You're in Portugal today, I believe. Nice to have you join us, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, it's nice to be with you. I'm doing well. Last minute, I think I booked the flight on Friday or Saturday because as I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, my schedule for October's shifted around because I wasn't able to do certain events, and therefore some other work got cancelled on me. And so now I don't have an obligation to be in London until kind of the middle of next week. So I've actually booked another one-way ticket. I love the idea of one-way tickets. So I've booked a one-way ticket to Faro, and a good friend of mine, I was actually going to go on this holiday, ultimate fitness holiday type thing. And I invited him along, and he's like, actually, you know what? Next week I'm going to be near Faro on this golf course, tennis court thing. Why don't you come along? And so I've come to join him in his place and hang out here for a bit. So
nice.
So that's all good. You're at home, I see.
I am, although I have been to and back from Greece. I went to Athens for a single day, which was good. I gave a talk over in Athens, which was really good fun, and then got back. It's all kind of a whistle-stop tour, so I didn't have a chance to enjoy the weather or see the sights.
Was it just one night?
Yeah, just the one night. Yeah, and straight back. So interesting because you kind of have the 2-hour delay, and you're waking up early for the talk in the morning, and then you get back. And I had to so it would have been 4 a.m. our time, 6 o'clock in the morning their time, and then of course landed back in Heathrow for a drive back that actually got me back at 1:30 a.m. the following day. So I was up for a good, almost 24 hours. So you feel it when you're driving back, you're starting to get a bit tired by that time. But yeah, no, it was really good, really good. Apart from that,
was it a talk or was it a panel or was it a Q&A?
No, it was a talk. It was a talk. Yeah, I gave a keynote on the future of payroll, which was good. It was good fun.
How long was your talk for?
An hour talk. Well, just shy. I think I was on stage for. Well, the talk was 50. I think I did 53 minutes and left a little bit of time for Q&A, which actually there weren't too many questions, so it was a little bit shorter than an hour. So yeah, it's quite a long time to be talking on stage for, and to keep the energy going in the morning on a subject that sometimes needs a bit of energizing, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was good. It's something that I've been in this industry, this niche or niche, depending on where you're listening from, for 20 plus years. So it's nice to share with the audience where I think the industry is moving to, but without boring everyone here, because there's a payroll podcast they can listen to this stuff on. Obviously,
yes.
Show. We don't want to lose our audience to the subject of payroll too early on. But it was, suffice to say, it was a lot of fun. Great to get out there, met some great people. I would love to have stayed another night. That'd have been awesome. I had a really good friend of mine who lives in Athens, and I didn't unfortunately have a chance to catch up with her due to time constraints, which is a bit of a shame, but hopefully I'll get out there again soon. Because you're out in Portugal now at the moment, so you've got decent weather.
Yeah, it was quite decent today. I think tomorrow is going to be rain, so tomorrow I'm going to probably more focused on the laptop and doing some work. Today, just went for a nice long meditation. Actually, it was lovely. I had a meditation on the beach, listening to the Atlantic waves. Then went for a walk because my friend was doing tennis lessons, which I wasn't doing. And then just hung out a little bit with him in the afternoon, went for lunch, did some shopping, played a bit of paddle tennis in the afternoon, and then came back here, really, so I can make the call.
I've just bought myself a paddle tennis racket. I haven't played yet, but I've just opened up courts nearby us. So myself and Lucy are going to go up and play. I know
You've never played?
Never played. The in vogue sport at the moment. You'll
like it, I think. Have you played? It's kind of a cross between tennis and squash.
I used to play a lot of squash, and obviously my son plays tennis. So that should be good.
Yeah, you'll like it. I liked it. We actually played 1-on-1 today, but it's normally done in doubles. And it's pretty cool, pretty easy to pick up. And actually, I looked at my watch, and I think I played like an hour of paddle tennis, but I think I only managed about 3,000 steps in that hour. So I actually do more walking for an hour than I do playing paddle tennis. But I think we were going easy because it was two of us on a full size court, and we didn't want to kind of bust the gut. And actually, it was kind of like as I was playing, and maybe this is sort of a part of a discussion for today. I was feeling, I mean, I was feeling a bit heavy anyway. I think I'd eaten something and my belly was not sitting right with it. So that slowed me down a bit. But, you know, my friend and I were both like fitness fanatics. We've both been into health our whole life and all that. But I don't know whether it is whenever I play tennis or paddle tennis, something like that, because there's a lot of stop starting plus picking up balls, chasing balls and things like that and getting them off the ground. I was starting to feel a little bit older than I like to think I am. Even though I'm now closing in on 50, unfortunately, I don't feel that way generally speaking, unless I'm playing tennis. I think,
Yeah, but it's
and,
using muscles you don't usually use as well, right? I mean, I've just done an Ironman race, as you know, because we talked about it on the show, and then I went and played football with my son and tore my groin, and that's just the short, sharp, different
oh,
muscle
did
groups,
you?
different
Oh,
movements.
right.
Yeah, I'm still in recovery, so I haven't done
All
any real
right.
exercise now for about since the end of August, so it's nearly 6 to 8
Well, the
weeks
thing
still
with an
recovering.
Ironman, all the disciplines in an Ironman are single directional, effectively, right? Running, swimming,
Non-impact, and they're
cycling,
long endurance type things, not short, sharp
long
starts.
endurance, and they're just
Yeah,
like you're a single plane of motion, effectively. And I find that that's quite interesting. Now, I do lots of varied plane of motion when I do yoga, but it's different because it's in a different controlled setting. But whenever you do like things like squash and tennis, I can feel, even though tennis, for
yeah.
some reason, lots of old people play tennis, or older people play tennis. Um, my one
But they
advantage is
played
that
all
I've got
their
the
lives,
youthness.
so they again,
Yeah,
it's still
that's
muscle
different.
memory. They used it.
That
Yeah,
exactly, that's the thing, and that's why when I went on this holiday a couple of years ago, one of these Mark Warner holidays, I was able to play with them because I had the youth, as it were, and was able to kind of run around and grab things, and they just had the precision and the ability to do things. But then I was thinking as well, like, is it really age, or is it self-imposed limitations and um, this idea of our self-concept, which is our how we perceive ourselves. And this could be in anything for listeners. It's not just in sport. It could be in what you think you're worth, financially. Now, you obviously deal with lots of potential clients coming in looking for new jobs, different salaries. And in fact, actually, my friend he's a contractor at the moment, but the firm that he's have asked him to go permanent, and he's thinking about doing that because he wants to buy a house and get a mortgage, and it's a lot easier if you're employed than it is when you're self-employed. And then looking at what he would be worth or what he would be happy with from a salary point of view. And I just remember thinking, you know, the first time I got paid a fair bit of money to do a talk, and I was thinking, wow, like and I wasn't at the time. I didn't. I don't know if I believed that I was worth it, but then
mm.
I think I've seen other speakers and people getting paid 2, 3, 4 times what I was paid then, and I know that they're not they're not the quality that I would expect for that. And I just think it's an interesting concept about how we value ourselves, how we and I've actually got some work coming up next year, and they're asking me for my expectations, and they're offering way less than I think I'm worth now. And I think there's a certain I think a certain developmental process that I've gone through where I feel comfortable saying one figure, right, whatever that might be, but maybe not saying a bigger figure. And even though my knowledge might not change, right, my ability to deliver might not change, but it's the identity I attach to who I am.
Mm.
It's like whether I'm worth that. And so I think it's an interesting concept to
It is
explore, this
interesting.
idea of
It's funny
beliefs.
you
Yeah.
raised it at a time when I saw something yesterday. A video a friend of mine showed me. Actually, she's a friend that listens to this show. I won't say who the video was of, but it was of a coach talking about their services, and they said something that I had an issue with, for whatever reason, right? And I challenged it. When I don't know if I would have that in my video if I was doing it. I'll say what it is in a minute, and I won't obviously expose who the individual was. That'd be unfair. But I'll come back to that in just a minute. But in terms of your question on the speaking piece, there's two elements. You can take the business approach to it and say, okay, this is why you're worth what you are, irrespective of self-esteem value. You could actually take a how big is the audience, price it per head, and take that approach to it, and what value do you think each individual is going to have, and therefore your price is decided by the price per head value. So therefore you can actually charge a different value to a smaller audience and be okay with that, as you could a bigger audience who charge a lot more, and that makes you affordable to more companies doing the talks that you did give, because you believe there's a a value that you're attached to it. So that's one way of sort of setting up from a business perspective. But what's really interesting in limiting beliefs about to go back to is like the Henry Ford thing, wasn't it? Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, either way you're right, or something along those lines. What someone said in this coaching, I'll mention it because I didn't know we were going to talk about limiting beliefs until you literally just mentioned it before we jumped on the call. And on this video, the individual who was promoting their services called themselves, that they explain what they'd done. They'd been in senior leadership roles and done this, that, and the other, and described themselves as a high achiever. And I thought, why is that relevant from a coaching perspective? Because it's all in the eye of the beholder and how you perceive yourself. So does having a senior leadership role make you a high achiever? For some, yes. For some, no. That wouldn't be something that I necessarily defined as myself as being a high achiever because I've had a senior role. There are people that never have high leadership roles but have phenomenal achievements in their own way of fostering, parenting, looking after a sick relative, sporting accolades, or whatever it might be, right? And I thought it was really interesting that in a promotional video, someone in that role would consider themselves, would term themselves high achiever in that context. And I thought, well, if I wasn't in a senior leadership position and I watched that, would I want to work with that individual because my perception, therefore, is that they are, and therefore, does that reinforce my belief that I'm not? In which case, you're already off to a bad start, in my opinion, because the idea of a coach is to hopefully overcome those kind of limiting beliefs. Or I don't know. It rankled with me because it's not to say that they're not, by the way, but in putting it in that context, it's an external view to say that. I don't know. It didn't sit with me very well because
that's interesting. I don't have an issue with that. I don't think I've got an issue with it. I think because it's like okay. Let's say I'm selling my services as a martial art instructor, right? I might say, I'm a black belt 5th Dan, right? By the way, listeners, I'm not, but I'm just using it as an example. And so, because it's a scale, and if that person has gone to a C-level job, okay, they have achieved, because the higher echelon of a career is to get to a C-suite in an organization, generally speaking. So I don't think there's an issue with them saying that they're a high achiever because, your example, okay, that other person could be a high achiever in, they're fostering children or they're doing that. But is that, I guess it depends who their audience is. If their audience, if the person that they're trying to attract are business, they're doing business coaching and they're looking at coaching people to excel in their career, a high achiever would be, I think you would look up to someone who's got to where you maybe want to get to. So I'm not sure that I would have it would have jumped out at me as much as it jumped out at you.
It definitely did jump out at me. I can't deny.
It is all relative. It is all relative. And I think the word high achiever, I'm going to just substitute it for a second with success or successful. And I think we've talked about this before, but success is really different, right? Because I feel like in some areas of my life, I'm quite successful in that, for example, I feel like I'm very successful in terms of my friendships that I've got, in terms of the relationships and time I spend with family, in terms of being able to explore the world and, having achieved, let's say, other things. But there are other areas where I feel like I'm not as successful. So success is really personal and really relative to the individual, whereas society, as we know, often define, or we're led to believe, define success in your status in your career, how much money you've got or you earn, or maybe the number of followers you've got now is the new level of success, a new metric of success. I don't know. I just think that's a bit dangerous because I think you have to.
I'm
Yeah,
going to
sorry.
jump in because, by the way, I'm not taking away from the fact that this individual is not a high achiever in the way that they view themselves, because that's fine. That's great. That's a positive thing. It's the way it was advertised as part of a coaching service that was my issue with, because by doing that in that capacity, you are defining. And you're right. Maybe if they were aiming at a particular cohort of individuals that are trying to get to the level they've been at, that would make sense. I don't believe that was the case in the one that I looked at. It was almost a way of confirming their own belief that they deserve to be there, which is why it became relevant, because you were saying, I know I'm worth X,
Okay.
someone else doesn't. So it was a way of, I felt they were actually showing their insecurities by highlighting their achievements,
That.
because
Yeah.
actually I think it's more powerful to say I've worked as a C-suite executive. That's enough. We have the opportunity
Yeah.
then to define whether that's an achievement for us or not, whether that's going to
Exactly.
be
Yeah.
helpful in my journey. It doesn't need to be followed up with that, therefore I'm a high achiever, because that's for me to define if I would decide to work with you, or for you to define for yourself. But by highlighting it in that way, actually it would actually highlight to me that there's some, in order just to make, by making that definition in those words, it's, I'm going to
Yeah.
stake it
It's
out
about
there.
like
Where I'm going.
trumpeting
It's
your own successes. Actually,
yeah,
I've mentioned it to you before and on the show before, but there's that book that I read most mornings, The Greatest Salesman in the World. And in one of the chapters, in one of the scrolls, it does talk about how, you know, I think it says, I don't know the exact words actually, I should do after having read it for 14 years now every day, but it talks about not like shouting about your successes and, and just letting it be, sort of thing. You don't need to shout about it. And I often, when I'm talking to students actually, and I'm talking about confidence and I'm talking about power posing and open body language and things like that, I'm often saying to them, look, you don't need to overdo it. And I often like to sit with my legs like really open and like pretend I'm like a sort of Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin kind of character, because I'm like, actually, when people have to like shout about how confident they are or how good they are in certain things, often they're not. It's masking an insecurity, because when you're
yeah.
really confident, you have a quiet confidence. You don't really, it's almost like you don't care you don't really care whether what people think or what people know and or
Because it
perceive
comes from
about
the
you.
inside. It's not
Yeah,
really,
it's an inside out job,
you
like
don't
we
need
talk
external
about.
validation because you have
No,
it from the
that's
inside.
it.
However, I do think it's really important we celebrate our successes, that we take a moment in our lives, because we work so hard to achieve them, that when we do achieve something that we've worked hard to do, that we take a moment to celebrate it. I don't think there's anything. I think that's a really important thing that we do. That we don't do enough. We end up in the rat race. We don't take time enough to reflect and look at what we've worked so hard to achieve or be successful at. But that's slightly different to making that as a public part of my my sales brochure, if you like. But I think it's really important we do take a moment to celebrate our successes. Going back to your talk about pricing and whether you're worth it, I think this is something good for the listeners to bear in mind. And this comes into the world of recruitment and CVs that I look at as well. Am I ready for X, Y, and Z next move? Am I ready to charge what I charge, or whatever it is? If you use coaching as an example, I'm a coach, but I'm not. There are people that have coached as a coach for a lot longer than I have. But I've been coaching, in inverted commas, for 20 years of my life. I just only got the qualification 4 years ago, 5 years ago, right? So in the world that I work in, which is recruitment, where I'm supporting people on their career journeys as a career coach, I've done that all my life. And I think for you, people might look at it and say, well, it's not worth it because you've X, Y, and Z. I mean, you've dedicated not just the years you decided to be a vitality coach to this, it's all of your life experience that goes into that talk. That goes way back beyond when you suddenly became the Harry Kalimnios author. You were finding your path way before that. And to get onto that stage, they're getting access to every element of your experience since that's become relevant to who you are now, not just the bit that the time that you decided to become a vitality expert. I think that's really important. I think people forget that bit. When they enter whatever they're doing, they bring their whole selves to the stage or to the book or to whatever it is, their next career move, not just their last role. And people think, I'm not good enough because I haven't done X, Y, and Z. No, but if you're in a leadership position and you haven't got the management experience, but you've got 4 children at home and you coach your local football team or whatever it is, it's like, well, actually, you've got loads of experience. You've been doing that for 15 years, and you just need to be confident in how you've utilized that. It may not have been in your last role, but how can we bring that to the front and give you the confidence to believe you can do this position because of your life experience rather than just because of what you did in your last position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. I mean, I think with me, when it comes to beliefs, it's always about references. And so what you've just been describing, I guess, is like, so the way I equate it is like your belief is like a stool top or a tabletop, and the references are the legs that support it. And so, if you can find certain references to support a belief or not, then you can either dismiss the belief or accept the belief. So, for
Mm.
example, going back to playing tennis and maybe feeling your age a little bit and going, oh, this just happens as you get older. But then if you can find someone else who's, 47 years old, as I am, who's super nimble, like aches, pains, and like, well, okay, it's not to do with age, right? It's obviously to do with something else. So the belief that as you get older means you need to slow down and do things in that kind of way maybe doesn't hold the same water. It's like I used to have did I have a belief years ago? I think I did have a belief years ago that, and I think we've talked about it before, where we accepted, dads have a bit of a pot belly, and as you get older, you get like that little beer belly sort of thing, and because most of the people around me at that age all had beer bellies, right? But actually, as soon as you see someone who's of a similar age who is in amazing shape, you're like, well, actually, it can't be then age, right? It can't be the age, right? Because if it was age, then everyone of a certain age would have that.
Yeah.
But it's that idea that we have these self images of who we are that are so challenging to shift, and I guess what is the way to shift them, and there are different approaches to it, I guess, but I think it's so strong in many of us that we can create situations in our own life. We can create physical manifestations of that aging, whether it's going through, challenging time as people age, and you start to kind of think, oh, I'm getting more aches and
You,
pains, or
you
I'm
used the
suffering
right
with.
word there, though. We've got the answer really is to challenge them, to challenge the limiting
Well, yeah.
beliefs. Don't limit your challenges by your beliefs. I can't do that because I'm too old. Actually, challenge your limits the other way around. You got to go, actually, well, I can do it, and maybe I
Mm,
can't do it instantly. I've got to find the way to get there. What's my roadmap? I want to play tennis. I am in my 50s. I've got this knee pain or whatever. Like, if I wanted to go back and I want it enough and the motivation's strong enough, what is my roadmap to get there? And if say
mm,
medically it's not even possible, then what are my alternatives? I don't just allow a diagnosis or a feeling, whatever, just to automatically say no, because that's always the easy option. The easy option always is to take the easy road, the route of water, and go, actually, no, it hurts, or actually, I haven't got the motivation to get off the sofa.
mm.
Well, if you're reinforcing your belief by you convince yourself there's no point because I won't be good enough anyway. There's no point because,
Yeah.
and you reinforce it. The answer really is to challenge those beliefs, and challenge those limits, which I know is easier said than not, right? But there's a saying that says the only limits in life are the ones you make. So most of the limits we have are self-imposed. Very rarely we
Yeah.
get them from anyone else. We self-impose them.
I mean, we do, but I think it's also society led as well, because we are the product of both, and or of what we've heard growing up, what we've seen growing up. So I think if we lived in a vacuum and didn't interact with anyone versus all the influences we get from other people, obviously we're going to end up two different people. But yeah,
Well,
what was the?
they're still one and the same. There's still an acceptance there where we have to challenge that acceptance. We have to challenge that just because we've been told it when we were a kid or not. I'm not saying it's easy, but there is always an
Yeah.
opportunity to challenge what someone's told us we're not good enough. Well, it's for us then to go, well, actually, I think I could be, and I'm going to try and make my, again, the who, not the how, right? Who do I know that can help me on that journey? I know a personal trainer, and X, Y, and Z said I could never run 5K. I don't know, whatever it is, and we believe that because we are a certain weight or a certain fitness or whatever, and we think no, that's absolutely right, I couldn't do that. But then I'd find someone that can help us on that. Find your roadmap. Who do I know that could help train
Mm,
me? Start with 3 steps, end up with 10, you end up doing 100 meters, and before you know it, you're up to 5K. And I know maybe that's a trivial example, but even so, you said yes, it's social, and yes, we hear things when we're younger, but it only has an influence because we're accepting what we're hearing. So again, it still comes back to being willing to challenge what we've always taught ourselves, those limiting beliefs. Well, they said it, so it must be true. We have to. I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. This
yeah.
is a difficult
Yeah,
journey,
and
but like
also I think like the big thing
before,
there, and I guess it comes back to the premise of our show about being mindful is is to challenge that in the first place, because most people take things as is, right? And what was I listening to today? I think I was listening to. Do you ever listen to the Diary of the CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett, Dragon's Den guy?
No, I'm not the
You're
biggest
not
fan.
biggest
I have
fan.
heard a few. I have heard a few.
I
I
mean,
yeah, I love the guests. I don't always warm to. Yeah.
okay, fair enough. But he was interviewing a doctor, guy talking about cancer actually, and he was talking about how you know a lot of it. Or I think it wasn't just about cancer he was talking about, but he was primarily talking about cancer and saying, look, we know primarily what causes cancer and what most cancers, and it's basically this the replacement in the cells of using fermentation instead of oxygen to supply itself. The whole Otto Warburg stuff, where he, the double Nobel Prize winner who talked about that replacing oxygen in the cells with fermentation of sugar is what's driving these cancers. And he said, look, most of the cancer, like society doesn't, not society, but cancer researchers, whatever, they're not accepting this viewpoint. They're not dealing with these things. But he was talking about that plus other diseases, whether it be heart disease or diabetes, and all these things that can be treated and reversed in many cases. And I was thinking about this because I was trying to tell my mum, because she has gone through just like normal upbringing, watching BBC News, watching all these things, and believes a certain thing. And I'm trying to tell her, look, for so many of these things, they're reversible, they're curable, they're lifestyle, they're this, they're that. But she's unaccepting of that a lot of the time because it's been so indoctrinated into her to believe a certain narrative. And we're not saying this is the case for the 100% of cancers or
Sure.
this that, and the other, but like the vast majority, he was saying. And it's not the first time I've heard that, and I've heard that from many people. And again, it's a path that I've been on for a long time, looking at like challenging the narrative. Is the whole point of this, is what I'm trying to say, is about challenging the narrative that we're given a lot of the time.
I agree. I mean, you taught me something. Well, two things I'll say here. One is it was you that highlighted to me the word that lives in the middle of belief, right? Which is lie. And I think that's quite interesting. And I'll let you talk about that in a moment because I know you've got a few other acronyms around that word and things. But it was you that point. I never noticed that word, but I thought that was an interesting thing to, this the lies we tell ourselves, the beliefs. If you think about it from an England football team point of view and penalties as an example, right? If we go up to that penalty and believe we're going to miss, more often than not that will come true. If you go up and believe you're going to score, more often than not that will come true. And it's almost often your action that determines the result, the way that you approach that action that determines the result. And belief has a lot to play in that. It's the secret, the law of attraction. Again, if you think something enough, it's amazing how sometimes that will come true. But that it's true for the negative and the positive. If we believe, for example, that our partner's going to leave us for whatever reason, or they're going to become unfaithful, or I don't know, I'm picking some real negative examples. But if you wish it enough and you tell yourself that's true, you'll be surprised at a subconscious level how many things you do to push your partner away. Doesn't make it acceptable, but eventually that comes true. And then you reinforce that belief by going, oh, I knew that was going to happen. And you miss all the signs is because you've been, there's so many things in here that it works.
I mean, you give this example, Nick, and I'm just going to jump in because honestly, I haven't had a long-term girlfriend, as you know, in a long time. I won't reveal to the listeners just how long, but when with the girl that I was going out with, where we had a long 4-year relationship, I had the same thought. I was putting it into my head that it was going to end, like maybe months before, and there was almost like a certainty, even though I didn't want that to be true. And it obviously manifested in it. So it is really, really careful what you not wish for, but what you believe, whether it's positive or negative, because you tend to do things on a subconscious level, as you said, which prove it. And it's going back to that quote by Henry Ford, right? Either if you think you can, or you think you can't, either way, you're usually right, because the brain and your actions will try and validate it. And it's very similar to like placebo effect, nocebo effect, all of those sorts of things. And this is where it comes to self-worth and what you believe you're worth and what you believe your body can do, or your fee should be for a certain thing. Because if you start behaving in that way, you'll start to become that way. It's like the acting as if I
Yeah.
remember, I think it was one of Brian Tracy's books or audios where he was talking about dressing for the role 2 levels above where you are, and to think about who you want to be before you become that. And it makes sense, actually, right? Why wait until you're that level to become that thing? You become that thing before you are that thing. And I remember actually, I had a friend at work, still a friend to this day, actually, but I've not seen him for a couple of years. But I worked at the London Stock Exchange, as you know, and I worked in the IT kind of area of it, like project management, a lot of it. But you could wear kind of anything really, not anything, but it was like business casual. Most people just wore like a shirt and trousers and things like that. And there was one guy who would always wear like kind of a suit, not 3-piece suit, just a normal 2-piece suit. And we were working in the same department, same job, but I always felt, and you could see it in meetings, you could see it in other ways, but there's a certain level of the way that you carry yourself, a certain level of respect that the other person gives you, or they might, if you go in together, they might think that that person's the one in charge versus you. And that could be my imagination and my belief, but actually I do feel like, you know, it's how it's how you carry yourself, as you know. And he actually has done very well now. I think he's quite high up in a big organization, actually. But I do think there's a certain element of, like, believing that you are that, worth that, or believing you are 2 levels above you, and then you
Yeah.
become it.
It's fun. So, I mean, look, I've got my son who's playing football, and he had some kids saying he wasn't good enough to get into the team, and he got into the team, and he was really excited. And then he went to school, and some of the kids again, say, "Well, we don't think you should be in it. You're not good enough. You're not good enough." And it's funny when you watch him play. That did manifest. He started to believe it, and then of course his level of talent almost went down, because he'd get the ball and he'd immediately pass it to somebody else because he was fearful he'd make a mistake. He almost became paralyzed by fear, because he was worried about what they were saying was, he believed it so much that therefore was unwilling to do anything with the ball. And it took, to be fair, the coaches and his team have been amazing, and they built up his confidence. And now he's believing he is good enough. And that's also come from challenging that belief by training with the hours people don't see, getting up early in the morning and doing sessions with me before school and things like that. And now he's starting to believe. He won a Man of the Match award 2 games ago, and he was over the moon. And he now feels like he belongs, but he's had to challenge that belief quite hard. And it's amazing that when one, as you say, depending whether you are, whether you're not, it's true, right? Or that thing is right. It is important that we do challenge those things. I think this is where it's so difficult, is when someone has low self-esteem, because if you have low self-esteem and there's a reason for it, that individual can focus so much on that thing that eventually you start to see the reactions you're expecting. So I don't feel attractive, being an example, right? And that gives you low self-esteem for whatever reason. But that feeling in itself, when it's perpetuated and on repeat, would actually make you probably less attractive to those people, because you're not showing the confidence that's within you. You're not, your true personality isn't coming out, because you've got that self-doubt. So it's really difficult that we need to try and challenge those things and find what it is that makes us beautiful in that moment. And it's not always about aesthetics. Or in football, what is your skill, Leo? Okay, you're not the most technical with the ball. I'm not going to say that you're better than the people that are more technical, but what are your skills? Your skills are pace. Your skills are commitment, our commitment to learning, and all the things you've got, the where maybe the real stars, the technical ones, don't put that extra hours of practice in. You can. This is where you can get your edge and do things. And he's done that. And it's amazing. He has to work really hard to challenge that belief. I know he's only 10 years old, but I've kind of seen this story come true over the past year. He started only a year ago. He came to football late, and now he's making remarkable progress. And he's really starting to accelerate and enjoy it. And it's been a really nice journey to watch him on as a parent on the sidelines, going from this very shy, introverted, I'm not good enough, and people reminding him of that, to suddenly actually, no, I deserve it. He's not the best on the team, but he deserves to be there, and he's committed, and his teammates like having him there. And it's a really nice story, but you have to start with challenging the beliefs, wherever they are. What's your strength?
Well, it's good that he's got you in the corner doing that. I mean, I remember playing football as well, and I had very similar thoughts to Leo, actually, because, and I remember this going back from probably when I was like 6, and I distinctly remember this at like 6 years old. I was at one of these football camps, and I think you had to get like different color badges, but you had to be able to, I think one of them was like, when you take a corner kick to get it in the air, basically, and there were like certain cones that you had to kind of clear. And I remember really struggling with those. And I think that and I just remember that a shift being placed where I was thinking I'm not good enough in this
Mm.
moment, and then that almost stayed with me. And I was a bit like that with with football, where I would like get the ball, and I would I'd often want to say someone was taking a throw in. I would often want someone to be quite close marking me as I was receiving the ball because it gave me an excuse, it gave me a bit of an out if I
Yeah, yeah,
screwed it
yeah,
up because
yeah,
there was someone.
yeah.
And I don't know if I ever got over that because like sometimes like kids can be cruel or kids can be like give the ball up because you're gonna miss or because you're gonna muck up, and then there's always that fear of screwing up. But the reality is, and I keep trying to teach people this all the time, is that you're gonna you have to fail and you have to take these shots and you have to keep missing, because that's how you're going to get better a lot of the time with that pressure. But
Yeah,
a lot of
and
the time we don't
use
give ourselves the time to do that.
or going back to the belief, or it's not who you are in that instance that determines whether you are good or bad at football because of the corner. It's who you think you're not. So you've told yourself that I'm not a footballer, therefore you're not.
Mm,
What you need then as a coach to say, look, you know what, strength may not be kicking a football through the cones in the air, but Harry, this is where you do have your strengths are in talking, are in encouraging others, in collaboration, all the things that actually some of the superstars don't have. I do know, using Leo as an example, he's one of the biggest talkers on the team because that's something that I don't need to teach him in terms of technical. When you want the ball, if there's a man on, or if you can help direct the team tactically, take control, that's all things you can do. That's the verbal piece. That doesn't need you to be able to do 100 kick-ups and 10 step
mm,
overs. You can take control and you'll get respect in different ways. And he's a very fast runner. So, I'm really trying to hone in on where his strengths and attributes are. And we all
mm,
have, the thing is, we all have different strengths and attributes. And we all look for different things. One coach will respect that in Leo, another coach won't, and that's fine. That's the same as the laws of attraction in relationships, right? There's the horses for courses, and people like different things. Someone might like your commitment to the way you live your life, Harry. They might like dislike it. Someone else might equally dislike it, and that's okay too. It's just being true to ourselves, but not letting, just because the first person you met doesn't like it, that shouldn't change who you are.
mm.
It's having the confidence in yourself to say, you know what, that's okay. I don't take that negatively. You're not going to make me feel any different. This is what I believe to be true about me, and I'm really actually passionate about the way I live my life and the choices that I make, and I think that's makes me who I am, and sort of challenging it and trying to get better with the things you want to get better at. It's really difficult for people because this is a
Yeah,
real.
it,
It's
it
really
is
tricky.
it
It's really
it is
tricky.
tricky, especially because, like you say, as a kid as well, you're going through lots of different coaches, and then you'll get coaches that do believe in you, but many won't or don't have time,
For sure.
and then one little word or one substitution. I used to hate getting subbed if I got subbed in a game because for me it was like you're not good
Embarrassing,
enough to finish.
shameful, all
But
the things.
yeah, but
Yeah,
then sometimes you see in top level games, right? Like some of the best players are getting substitutes, or the captains are getting
I know.
substituted, and things like that, right? But it's interesting because you talked about, well, I don't know if you mentioned the word self-concept, but like Carl Jung talks about this idea of self-concept and how that's formed from three things: your self-ideal, your self-image, and your self-esteem, which you mentioned self-esteem. But we can have different self-concepts in different areas, right? So you can be supremely confident as a golfer, but then
Yeah.
terrible self-concept as a tennis player. But even within the game of golf itself, you can have a great self concept when it comes to driving the ball, but then putting, you have a completely like terrible self concept of who you are. Um, and so like you can be confident in such small little areas, and I think to build the confidence in the other areas is find the ones that you are confident in, and again challenge the reference points you have for those other areas that you're struggling in. And I think that's what I try and do when I struggle with believing in myself in some areas is think about, okay, what is the reference that I'm using to actually have this conclusion, and is there something that actually will take that reference away, right? um,
I think
is
that's
it
one of the
that
reasons that things like gratitude diaries are so powerful as well, or thankful, and trying to be more thankful for the world around us, is because as humans, since the dawn of time, since for the last, generation, maybe we've always been about survival, right? And most of human history, it's been about survival, and we tend to
Mm.
focus on the negative first because that's innate in us to go into the survival mode, if you like. And I think the gratitude dies sometimes remind us to look outside of that and not just think about what we don't have or our limitations. Which is, I don't know why, the human nature is we tend to focus more on our limitations, what we don't have, than what we do, and yet we live in a
Yeah.
world of abundance, but we don't notice it because we're too focused and transfixed on the things we don't have, or the negative traits within our character, or the things that we think are negative in terms of the way that we're perceived. And we put all of it, we put so much. We always think and say, like, if we were able to, like, redirect all of that energy that we focus on as a human race in terms of the negative into a positive place, what a positive world we could actually be living in. And this isn't a criticism because it's a human trait that we all have, but there's a genuinely a mental health crisis at the moment, and a lot of that is down to the fact that we, as you say, influenced by social media, influenced by loads of different things, where
Well,
a
yeah. I
lot of our
mean,
energy is spent on the negative, and the negative parts about ourselves we don't like. I don't like the way my eyes. I hate my profile. I cannot stand my side on. I can't look at a photo of me with my profile. There you go, admitting a vulnerability or whatever it might be. I
well, nor do I, mate.
absolutely. I don't know
Not
where it
you,
comes from.
me.
I don't know where it comes from. Someone probably has said something somewhere in my history. I generally don't know. I probably need to go deep to find it out. But I cannot stand any photos of my profile. Like, I just hate it. I feel really yeah. I just don't like it. I just don't like it at all. I feel really it's a negative bit about me. But I don't try not to focus on it. Eventually, it'll come up when I see a photo. But there are bits about ourselves that I can't change that. So it's ridiculous for me to even be worried about it. I'm sure no one else would even notice it, but I notice it. I remember
Yeah,
a
we
friend of
do.
mine
I mean, I
in
noticed
my A
something.
levels. A friend of mine said a photo never looks good if you look good in it. You could have 10 people that look amazing, but if we've got our eyes
Mm,
closed and our tongue stuck out, whatever, it's a terrible
yeah,
photo. We're like so fixed on our own image.
yeah, of course. I mean, that's it. Because now more than ever, it is about image, right?
I know.
We're
Sad
all
though, isn't it?
becoming professional models and professional photographers, right? That's the way that people are being taught that you can be successful and get ahead. And I look at some pictures and I just think people are not taking real pictures anymore a lot of the time. I see this even with my nieces when they pose for some of
All
the
the filters
pictures
and
that,
things.
um, well, not even the filters, but it's more just the expression, right? Like rather than a genuine smile. And we've talked about this before, I know. And because it's about creating an image that you want people to see of you rather than
Yeah. But
allowing
I think
who you are
there's
to
also
come
so much
through.
judgment in the world. And we're going off a bit off tangent here, but there's a lot of judgment. So often the people that feel insecure are the ones that judge others, right? So they project it. They have insecurities and they'll project their insecurities on others by bullying or being negative about somebody else. And it becomes everyone in it, because everyone's feeling low about themselves, everyone's projecting. And it's like, how do we stop the cycle?
Yeah,
It's,
I
what can
know.
we
I think
do?
we're in a bit of a state.
We are.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I wanted to say something earlier, and it's kind of on topic but off topic. Where, we're talking about mental health. You mentioned something about that, like, and all this comparison, and all of that. But I went to a talk, and you'd have quite liked it. It was one of these health meetups that I go to, but it was I can't remember her name, Doctor something Goodman, but she's got a book out about it's all about the toxins that we're exposed to all the time, and I think we just can't underestimate like all the plastics, all the chemicals that are in products that people are using, um, which is causing a whole host of things, not least for be a big part of the reason why um, maybe girls are getting into puberty, like on average, like 2 years earlier than say 50, 100 years ago. But these things are also massively, as does diet, as does light, as does social media, affect that mental health aspect of things. So,
Mm.
you've got someone who's already fragile, and then they're kind of comparing themselves to someone they'll never meet and never know, and that they haven't achieved as much in this short life that they've had. It's going to lead to a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of inadequate self-worth, and all of this. I don't know where I'm going with this, other than to say that I recognise that as a problem, And I recognize that was a problem within me. And I've had the experience of not growing up with these things. And I'm reasonably, hopefully cautious. I can't avoid all the poisons that float around, but I try to do my best not to put things on my skin and ingest things that are knowingly bad for me. And I
You're
struggle.
very disciplined. So
Yeah.
I'll take a slightly off point, but you mentioned the diseases and the way and you mentioned cancer earlier, and there was a point that popped into my head. I'll bring it back. You're talking about books. I don't know if you've finished reading Cured. It's a really interesting book, but
I haven't started it actually. I need
have you not?
to read
It's
that.
good.
No.
There's a cancer treatment which they decided not to pursue this kind of form of cancer treatment. I can understand why, and I'll tell you why. But they believe it in the book. There was a lot of evidence to suggest this might be a really positive cancer treatment, which is actually you overfeed it. You actually feed the cancer to such an extent it almost overfeeds and dies off and goes away. And usually, as soon as there were two in the book, there's two ways the treatments could have gone, and they kind of sided with the way of no, let's go for prevention and killing it off and not letting it spread before we do the other way. And they haven't really explored the alternative. And I understand why. I mean, who would want to be a test case for feeding a cancer inside your body? However, on studies on rats and other things has proved to be very successful, where they actually overfeed and it kind of just it goes hell for leather and ends up with killing it off in a slightly different way. And apparently that's worked for other diseases as well. So I thought that was quite interesting and maybe something for you to have
I mean, I can see the rationale behind it. If you consider a human as a cell, you overfeed a human enough, they're gonna die of overeating and stuff. And that used to be, honestly, that used to be my tactic. I think I mentioned it before, but I used to be addicted as a kid to Ferrero Rocher. I used to love the Ferrero Rochers. And so I used to get a box of, I think there's 16 in the box they used to have.
Lovely, yeah.
And I can't just have one. I know myself, which is why I don't have things in the house all the time. And I become obsessed with things. Recently, I got obsessed with the show Lucifer, and I watched the entire 6 seasons in about 2 weeks. It was an absolute nightmare.
I did that with Suits, 9 series, and read the whole thing.
I can't get into that. I can't get into anything with the series now because I know what I'm like, and I get hooked onto this thing. And with the Ferrero Rocher, I would eat all of them in one sitting, like 16 of them in like the space of about an hour. But then it kind of would work for me because then I wouldn't want them for like another 6 months or a year. And so I can kind of, if I use that as an analogy with the cancer thing, where I think, okay, you have so much of it that you're just like, oh, I give up, I'm done.
Leaves the body.
So I can understand the rationale, but it is a bit of a dicey ethical.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, and I think it'd be interesting for us to talk about this in a future episode, the dark triad, the narcissism, psychopathy, and masochism, and the dark triad and how they interplay in characters and leadership and different things. It's really, really fascinating subject. But I discovered something, and I felt like I've known a couple of narcissists in my life. You know, one of them that really had a massive impact on my life, as you know, years ago. I won't go into it on this show now, but the definition, when I sort of dug deeper into it, and it does link to what we're talking about in terms of beliefs and limitations and things like that. And I need to do more research, so I'm by no means someone who's going to be preaching that I know everything about this, because I certainly don't. I'm start of my dark triad sort of journey. But in narcissism, apparently it's really exhausting, because the true definition of a narcissist is someone who creates an alternative personality of someone who isn't, puts himself at the forefront of everything, because they actually have zero belief that they're worth it. And that never really occurred to me. I just thought they lacked that. A narcissist typically lacked that EQ, that empathy, that emotional intelligence, that I don't know, loads of things that you could talk about. But in reality, that it's often narcissists will get absolutely exhausted, and they'll get very, very, very tired, because they're constantly trying to live up to this self they've created of this kind of perfect person, and they're so fearful of losing it and being found out that they obviously impact everyone they come into touch with if they really have really bad narcissistic tendencies, that they leave a trail a devastating trail in their wake. But it's because they're working so hard to maintain this view of themselves that they actually don't believe in. I always thought a narcissist did believe that version of themselves. It never occurred to me that this was all a kind of facade and a created identity. I just thought it was actually, that's what they thought. And they just had a really low EQ, really didn't understand how they're impacting on others, because they didn't have that But they
No,
weren't
I think,
genetics for it. But
I mean,
that's quite
I mean,
fascinating.
obviously, it comes from like a Greek mythology stuff, doesn't it? Like Narcissus, or not? What's his name? Narcissus, I guess. And he keeps looking in the water to see his reflection,
Well, I don't know.
and
You
it
might know more
is.
than me.
Yeah, I mean, I have to read up on the story a little bit if we talk about it in detail another time. But it does come from that idea of, and this is what I see with when I see social media, and I see, the girls taking hundreds of photos to get the right angle and look like nothing like themselves a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I've met quite a few women who are, either got lots of followers or look a completely different way in like their photos to how they actually are in real life, because again, they're insecure in my view about how they really look, and they're basically creating a new persona to show out to the world because they're not willing to show their real persona. And I think, to some extent, we all wear masks. We all create a little bit of we have different ways that we express ourselves around different areas and people. But I feel like that becomes a real problem. I mean, I do that to some extent myself, but I feel like I'm a lot more real and say things as they are. And in fact, this show, right, we've talked about lots of things really openly and honestly. And I think a lot of that comes from having an inner knowing about yourself, an inner
Mm.
self confidence that is sometimes rare. I think, in the world today, because we are so obsessed with how other people perceive us that we don't value ourselves in the same way that we maybe once would have done.
Well, I mean, if you bring that to narcissism, I guess it's it's narcissism is when you're excessively always looking for someone else to you're looking for to give you that self-esteem boosting, to be seen as exceptional, to be seen as being this thing that we've created, but actually that you're still you're seeking it from an external source. So it still goes back to the
Mm,
first point we made earlier. So whether you think you can or you can't, I was going
yeah,
to be right. We've got to look from within, not try and get
yeah.
that from an external place. You told me a while ago, and I think this is relevant. I'm sure you have you told me a story about an elephant, or there's an elephant example about
Oh,
limiting beliefs.
yeah. No, it's the, and I think this is true. But like, when a baby elephant is being trained, and they put like a small chain on on the ankle of the elephant, so it can just walk in a circle and it can't like escape. But then as the baby elephant gets bigger and bigger, it could quite easily break the chain and go off, but it doesn't ever do it because it's being conditioned to believe that it's trapped by this chain, this belief that it has now that it can't escape, even though it could quite easily do that. And I think that's
Mm.
often
Yeah.
us, right? And if you think about it, sometimes a lot of our limiting beliefs come from when we're young. So we might have had our 5-year-old friend or an 8-year-old teammate at football say, "Oh, you're no good at this," and then that's the baby chain. That's the chain that's attached to you.
Mm.
But then you're 30 years old or 40 years old, and you still let this 8-year-old boy, who you've not seen for 25 years or whatever, chain you when you could easily
Yeah.
break free of that chain, metaphorically speaking. And it's
We have
I
learned
mean, it's a
helplessness as
powerful
well, don't
metaphor.
we? That's something else that is
Yeah,
it's
and that's
not
basically
quite
what it
the
is.
same.
And
Yeah.
you know, this idea of learned helplessness, and yeah, I
But
think
there's a
it's
story
interesting.
probably similar to your chain one. I don't know exactly how it goes, but there's a similar one where a prisoner will, if they're constantly imprisoned and told they can't escape or whatever it might be, that they the learned helplessness piece. How long will they stay imprisoned in a door which you have to pull rather than push? They don't realize it,
Mm,
so that they're the whole time against the door. And actually, they teach themselves they can't get out. They tell themselves there's no future, whatever else. And actually, if they just pulled on the door,
mm.
it's open, it's unlocked, and a prisoner will often could in theory stay locked up for an awful long time until they
Well, I
try and
mean,
think creatively about how they can improve their situation or get out of the space. But we
we,
don't
we,
bother
we saw
trying. We give up
that.
trying. We give up trying.
We saw that play out during COVID. I actually listened to the Boris Johnson interview on Diary of CEO. So Stephen Bartlett interviewed Boris Johnson for about 2 hours. I listened to most of it, And
Is that the one
I
where he
think
throws Sue Davis under the bus and says it wasn't me, she knew the
uh,
whole time at the parties? Was that the interview? I
something like
heard some
that.
snippets of it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I didn't listen to all of it, but and also it was mainly to plug his book. And he was
Sounds
going
about
into
right.
that interview as a politician, really, and that he wasn't really properly answering questions. I felt in a certain way. But either way, what I was going to say about this prisoner that you say, pull the door instead of push the door, is, and they couldn't believe it as well, but they effectively imprisoned the whole population, but they couldn't without us wanting to be imprisoned, or without the population deciding not to go out, right? And so
Yeah.
they put this position on people, or not everyone, because some people defied it, but they effectively put this everyone in prison in a learned helpless state, where they were like, oh, I can't do this, I'm going to kill people if I step outside the front door, and this, that, and the other.
Well,
you know so
there was an
we've lived
irony
through
in there,
that.
wasn't there? That other countries went with, there's a whole herd mentality thing to defeating the virus, and yet actually most of our population, certainly in the UK, we had a herd mentality in the way that we followed the rules. One did it, so we all did it, and it was frowned upon if anyone went against it, because we have, they basically managed to make all that work in the way they did through a herd mentality kind of
Oh yeah, I
process.
mean they had deep psychological, or psyops as
Mm,
they called, there was, I think, I can't remember what the section of the UK Army was, that was, you know um, employed with kind of getting some of this stuff going. But when you dig deep into it, and I haven't done for a while now because it gets a bit annoying and upsetting a lot of the time,
sure.
you just see how people could be manipulated into believing a certain thing, or taking certain actions. And whilst I think that's bad in certain ways, I actually think, why don't we take advantage of this in positive ways, right? If you want to get the nation healthy, for example, we could do that like pretty within a generation, easily, probably within a third of a generation. Um, and we've talked about it before, right? But people will change behaviors. We saw it with smoking outside. We saw it with putting seatbelts on. We saw it with putting masks on. We saw it with, staying indoors, right? People can change the behavior. And so you can change it in a positive way, and
Yeah.
use all these kind of things for positive rather than other
And
ways.
people, it's scary, like how much we can be manipulated. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the movie Rwanda. I mean, I know we're talking about
Rwanda
1994,
or
but
Hotel Rwanda? Rwanda.
well, Hotel Rwanda was obviously based on what was happening. But
Yeah.
how even within our generation, we've seen the genocide in Rwanda, and many other places as well, but where people who have lived next door to each other and been really, families and friends, and suddenly through manipulation and a change in beliefs, against the Tutsi as it was then, the Hutu militia, and people just killed family and friends that they knew and lived side by
Mm.
side all their lives, and suddenly their beliefs changed because they were influenced and manipulated and all these other things that happened. And that I go back to the word you mentioned earlier with the word lie,
Yeah.
but you would
Yeah.
think that would never happen. We think to ourselves, well, I would never do that. But then when you look at things like the pandemic and realize, well, maybe I have, okay, not wavered to the extent of Rwanda, but people have done things they never thought they were capable of because they've been influenced or coerced
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever. And the mind is
Absolutely.
incredibly strong. And as you say, if we could channel that in a positive way, we all have it within us. I was talking, funnily enough, to a friend of mine yesterday, completely separate, but hopefully this makes sense. So I gave a talk, the keynote I went to Greece for, it went really well, and I came off buzzing. You have a few bit of anxiety before you go up. How's it going to go down? I want to make sure I deliver a good talk for the people that got me there and all those kind of things. And when you finish, you have this high, you have this euphoria. Like anyone who's been on stage or done a theatre show or played a gig or whatever it is, right? You have that euphoria. And I said to Lucy and the friend we had over yesterday, what I find really interesting is that euphoria was within me before the show. I just couldn't access it because nothing actually
Mm.
it's a bodily thing, right? No one gave me a tablet and suddenly I felt better. And yet all these feelings were already there within me, but I didn't know how to awaken them. And I had to go through that process to awaken those senses, to get those endorphins and all the different things moving in my body. But they were already there to start with. And if we were able to access that more often and work out a way of accessing the things within us that make us feel great, and rather than have to go through the process that I've had to get through to get there, what a wonderful thing it would be. But what's really interesting is we often forget that we have it within us to feel great in any moment. We have within us to feel terrible in any moment. It's like we've got to sometimes challenge how we're feeling. Go, okay, I feel awful right now. What can I do to try and tap into the bits within the reservoirs of my body and my soul to go, actually, I'm worth more than this. I can feel better than this. I have got good things going on in the world here. I'm feeling really low, but there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's someone else that I could probably relate to what I'm feeling right now. There's someone else that I could lean on. We don't. It's such a shame, but and I don't know what the answer is. But if we're able to try and have more awareness of ourselves, to think in that moment, actually, it's within me to feel amazing. No matter how low you feel right now, it's still within you. There's something within your system that could help you to feel amazing. You just got to try and find a way to access it.
But I mean, that's it. I mean, like I talk about the 3 things that you focus on that change your state in any moment in time, an adaptation of what I got from Tony Robbins, but it's what you pay attention to, what language or meaning you assign to what you pay attention to, and the actions you take, because that will create your state, effectively, those 3 things. So you can feel that euphoria by shifting what you pay your attention to, or what you decide it means, or the language you use to describe what you're paying attention to, and the actions you take. And then you create that energy, you create that emotion within you on tap. And when you do that as well, you can then effectively anchor it as well. So like you've done NLP, so you can anchor it to certain, like, and they often teach you, you pinch your kind of skin or whatever as you do the thing that you want to feel. So every time you pinch that skin, it's like the Pavlov's dog thing. Then you'll feel that way, because those emotions come, as you know, like from within. Everything comes from within, right? Effectively, I believe.
Always that there's a simple way to position it. I don't know if it was your story or I've heard it somewhere else, but it's a really clear way of positioning it. You're in a car accident, right? And the guy or girl you've had an accident with has hit you in the side of the car, and you're fuming. It's your brand new car. You're driving whatever it is, the car of your dreams, and you're furious. You're on your way to work. You did nothing wrong. Completely not your mistake, right? And you get out and you're fuming, and you're thinking about all the things that have impacted you, how hard you worked to get the car, and you get out, and as soon as you get out, you realize the person in the car is rushing to the hospital because their partner's in labor in the back seat, and it's all gone wrong. And instantly you're like, for most people, you'd like to think their whole mindset instantly shifts off, we need to get this person to hospital. Don't worry about this now. Suddenly none of that matters. And the part of humanity that makes us different to AI and all these things, that human connection piece comes through, and it's like, right, suddenly all that anger is gone, like in a heartbeat, because we know that the most important thing in that moment now actually isn't about whether it's an accident or not. The blame isn't important in that moment. It's how can I get help to the person, my fellow human being here, the help that he or she needs to get the treatment they need to be well. And it's always within us to change from anger to support, from sadness to happy. But we got to try and connect with the bits inside us that enable that to happen, to go through the reframing that I know you're very passionate about. We've talked a lot about on the show. How can we reframe the moment to just make us see it with a slightly different perspective, and a perspective that serves us better? Because thinking negatively very well,
that's it. I mean, I think that's the ultimate thing which I say to people, is that it's because it's not about right or wrong, or this is better or this is worse. It's like, you decide, does the way that you are serve you or help you, or does it hinder you? And then you can make the choice and say, well, actually, maybe I do want to be a grumpy pants and moan at the world and everything. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, all power to you. But if you're there and you're not happy with who you are in that way, then you can make that choice to change. Well, I say make that choice. I mean, it is a choice, but it is, the road is long.
You can certainly start challenging it.
And I think that's it. But I'm conscious of time as well. But I think, like, when it comes to
time's gone. We've been that.
I mean, that's it. I think when it comes to these beliefs, as we said, like you said, it's the word lie in the middle, but I say, surrounded by BS, right? and the
That's
BS
it.
that
I
we
knew there
tell
was something more
ourselves.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beliefs.
If I do the
Why and
PG-13 version, I say big stories as opposed
okay.
to
Well done,
the other
bullshit.
word. Yeah.
We'll go back to
So
Henry Ford, right? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're
yeah,
right, and this is a good
exactly.
thing to be mindful of. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe for our audience this week, maybe think about something that you do have a belief about that you is limiting you in a small way. Not like we're not talking like big life limiting beliefs,
No,
but
try and
something
challenge
small,
it.
and see if you can challenge it in some way. Right? It's even about asking for a free cup of coffee of your prep person or something. I don't know, something that is challenging you where you think that will never happen, that won't, that's not possible, and change it and see if you can find a different reference. So it
Yeah.
could be anything. It might even be, like I said before. Okay, when you're old, you get old and fat, right? Let's find someone in your community who's old and in great shape. Maybe that will challenge your belief or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Or
just
try and
find
reframe,
something.
or reframe something that you've got going on.
Yeah,
Maybe there's something that's holding you back from speaking to a friend or a partner or a family member because something happened, and you're only seeing it from your perspective, and it's been really difficult to reframe it in any other way. But there's people that say if you had the same education, the same version of events, the same lifestyle, the same everything they had in that moment, the person that gave you the reaction they did, you may have reacted in the same way. And
yeah,
you're always coming at it from the education, background, morals that you've got, but the other person that's annoyed you may not have had access to the same resources you had, so they have a different reaction to it. So there's a chance to reframe maybe an argument that's held you back, a person you haven't reached out to. I don't know. That it's absolutely right. An action, either challenge an action or a belief in the way that Harry did, or try and reframe something that that's holding you back or is impacting you in a different
yeah.
way. So
And let us
um,
know about it as well.
yeah, for sure.
On our Instagram or watching
YouTube
this YouTube video on
or
the
comment on the YouTube video. Yeah,
comments.
for sure.
Yeah, on the comments. We'd like to hear that.
Harry, you're on holiday, and I've taken you for an hour and 5 minutes of your Portuguese sunshine. It's probably not light now, but
It's gone dark now, yeah.
there you go.
But I
I've
did
ruined
come
your
back.
evening.
I came back on time. I was playing paddle tennis. I thought, do I have time for a swim? And I thought I didn't. So
You would have had
I
because I
came to.
was
I know I
late.
would have done because I was, but I didn't in the end.
You're laughing because
Uh,
I'm always late. I had a good
I
reason this
know,
time.
I
I've
know,
come
I
back
know, I know.
from
No
an appointment,
worries.
but
That's all good. It's all
yeah.
good. But
Well,
yeah,
listen, I'm away
I'm
next
going to
week.
enjoy the rest of my time.
I think I'm in
Sorry?
Arizona, so I might be able to record. I'll try and take my stuff out with me, but if
Next
not,
week you're going to be in Arizona.
I will. Yeah.
Ah, right. Phoenix or elsewhere.
Phoenix, Scottsdale, Phoenix. Going to take the fam out. Going to have a little look around and enjoy ourselves. Got a friend who lives out there, so yeah, it should be good. So I
Oh,
might see
nice.
you stateside. If not, I will see you when I get back.
Yeah, well, let me know. And yeah, enjoy Arizona. I almost went to Phoenix just purely because my niece is called Phoenix, and I thought I'll go to Phoenix and buy something with Phoenix on it. But even though I could just easily buy it on the
Well, I
internet,
used to
but I
love the
thought,
Phoenix Suns growing up because NBA Jam on the N64 was always Phoenix Suns or Chicago Bulls, and I was
yeah,
always
Charles Barkley, he was the
that's
guy.
it, Charles Barkley. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
know I know
I
the
know. Well, you're
NBA
massive.
teams.
And by the way, listeners, Harry's a particularly decent basketball player. He's very, very good. So
Ah,
yeah, you talk about not
yeah,
being good at football. You excelled at other sports.
that's all
I
right.
almost think you and I should probably swap from doing Mindful Pass and turn it into a travel show because every time we meet, you are either abroad or I am, and we seem to be visiting
Mm.
half
Well, it's
half
good for
the
the mind
country.
and it's good for the soul to travel, so that's
Yeah,
why. And it is a path. So there we
it
go.
is
It all fits in nicely.
good
All
stuff.
right, perfect.
Right. Have a good evening, Harry. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Please share it with
Yes,
you if you can. Subscribe. Subscribing is really important. It just really helps our numbers. Please do review the show. That helps them even more. Be really grateful. We get huge ranking boosts when you leave us a review. And it means, most importantly, it's not really the ranking that's important. It's the fact that when it ranks higher, more people find the show and more people then
that's it.
subscribe and listen in, and we're able to
And
help
can
more
be
people have a
helped.
bigger reach. So please do that. It'd be really amazing if we came back next week or next episode and had a few more reviews on our shows to help amplify the message. So please do that for us. It would be amazing. And we'll look forward to tuning in and seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time, probably.
Take care, everybody.